Its first phase for oil byproducts trade has become operational. 4, natural resources, including fossil fuels, are going toward end, and in some decades, and hence they have to be exploited in a sustainable manner. On the other hand, the world population, especially in developing countries, including oil-producing countries or region, has rapidly increasing, and so is their need to energy. That is why we have to move together forward to obtain more and more know-how pertaining to renewable energy and, most importantly, nuclear technology, in accordance with the accepted international law and regulations, and localize it in order to afford and manage energy consumptions and productions in an efficient way without interfering with monopolies. 5, introduction of institutions under the roof of which producers could put up constructive dialogue on natural gas and coordinate their policies have to be earnestly considered as very effective means to have a consistent market which leads to market stability. Thank you for attention.
Dr. Attar is going to join us for the roundtable discussion after the Tiana break and raise a number of issues, very provocative and interesting ones, like an international energy bank for investment. It's quite a novel idea that I have not heard before, so I'd like to ask you about it during our roundtable discussion thereafter. At this stage, I'd like you to pull out your voting devices, if you will, for me, please. And we have a couple of questions we'd like to pose. The first one we have for you is, can Saudi Arabia make the shift from an oil-centered based economy to a broader energy leader? Can Saudi Arabia make the shift from an oil-centered based economy to a broader energy leader? If you agree that it can make that transition, it's 1, yes, but our mindset will hold us back. Yes, but our mindset today will hold us back. Number 3, maybe, but not clear if we can manage the research and development required to make that transition. Or number 4, no, Saudi Arabia should continue to focus on oil and petrochemical expertise for the future. If you can go ahead and vote now. Can Saudi Arabia make the shift from oil-centered economy to a broader energy leader? Okay, so let's digest these numbers here. 25% said yes, we can make the transition. 30% say the transition can be made, but our mindset will hold us back a bit. And 31% said maybe, but not clear if we can manage the research and development that is required. And 12.5% of you say like we should just stay doing what we should do. Knowing the theme here is value creation through alliances and partnership for this session, it's interesting that the R&D capabilities may not be there now, but in fact would be a good place to start in terms of alliances for the future. Another question I'd like to pose is not one we have written here. I'd like to see if we can flash this one up. Is the OPEC cartel a positive or negative influence on forging alliances for the future? Is the OPEC cartel a positive or negative influence on establishing alliances? Yes or no, if we can do that. So number 1 is yes, and number 2 is no. Is the OPEC cartel a positive or negative influence on forging strategic alliances and value creation? Number 1, yes, it's a positive. Number 2, it is not. If you can go ahead and vote. The cartel was designed to try to maximize the coordination of the oil-producing nations. Is it still a positive now? And the 64% of you agree that, in fact, it still plays that role of enhancing alliances. It's a question I'd like to pose to Peter later on during our roundtable discussion of the role that OPEC plays. 27% perhaps thinks that it is dated, and 7% or nearly 8% believe that it's too early to judge or they're not aware of the subject matter. It's an interesting topic. The reason I put it up there now is for discussion into the roundtable of the usefulness of not only OPEC, but the institutions that kind of govern the global economy today. There were some that would argue that the G7 or the expanded version of the G8 doesn't reflect the global economy the way it is today, nor do the institutions like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, that a transformation is needed and to be more inclusive for the future, despite the titles that would suggest so. I think this is a good transition to bring in a private equity person to discuss the investment opportunities that are available to forge alliances and partnerships. Where's the capital going in this transition from just an energy-based or oil-based economy into one that's diversifying from this point forward because of the need to generate jobs and a more balanced revenue stream. Let me introduce Khalid Al-Yahya. He's the co-founder and president of Middle East Asia Capital Partners, better known for his work in this region as the company name MAP. Dr. Al-Yahya, the floor is yours. Thanks very much.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first start by saying that I'm honored and delighted to be here today at this prestigious forum, speaking to you on the exciting topic of clean energy. Energy, Alliances of Horses and Forces, the provocative title of this session, insinuates different ideas to different people. But I find it relevant to my topic today because clean energy is indeed a winning horse from an investment point of view, and a force that will reshape the world in many ways, and a cause around which business and political alliances are being forged. It is one of the fastest growing industries, already attracting more than $100 billion of investment annually. It is producing new markets, cutting-edge technologies, and millions of job opportunities. In Germany, for example, the clean energy industry will be a bigger employer by 2015 than the country's formidable car industry. The urgency to deal with two principal challenges facing the world is behind the rising prominence of clean energy. First, the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to combat climate change. And second, the need to develop alternative energy sources to make up for the gradual global depletion of fossil fuels. In the past decade, there has been a sea of change in public opinion with respect to climate change. The debate now centers little on whether such a phenomenon is real, but rather on what to do about it. The custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, the country endowed with the largest reserves of oil, has once again demonstrated outstanding leadership during the OPEC meeting held in Riyadh last December, when he announced a $300 million grant to fund research aimed at climate change. The research would primarily focus on advancing the development and deployment of carbon capture and sequestration technologies for the oil industry, as well as the development of cleaner oil technologies and less emitting hydrocarbon fuels. Now, also shortly after, Kuwait and Qatar and UAE each announced a $150 million grant for the same purpose. Technological breakthroughs coming out of such research would have huge dividends in terms of the speed and effectiveness by which climate change can be tackled. This would minimize the hardship that the world economy would have to endure in combating climate change and allow developing countries to enjoy the same cheap energy advantage that fueled economic growth in the industrialized world. After all, it is the consensus that there is no scenario under which hydrocarbons will not continue to be the primary source of energy for the planet throughout the 21st century. And therefore, reducing emissions from this particular source is indeed a worthwhile cause to pursue. So why am I speaking to you today about clean energy in emerging Asia? Frankly, there's a bit of vested interests involved. For the sake of transparency, MAP Capital, a firm that I founded with two other partners, saw a compelling investment case in this field and followed through by creating a private equity fund, which at $400 million is the largest clean energy fund in emerging Asia, if not in all emerging markets. MAP Capital is also at the early stage of formulating a similar fund for the Middle East and North Africa. Now, having gotten this out of the way, let me share with you the fundamentals that make the Asian opportunity look so attractive. For the past 3 decades, Asia has been the region of the world experiencing economic growth unprecedented in the history of mankind. Hundreds of millions of people have crossed the poverty line on their way to becoming middle-class consumers with much higher per capita energy needs. In China, for example, where 1/5 of humanity lives, car ownership will jump 4-fold within the next 2 decades. And while in the past Asia has been regarded more as a victim of climate change, with many of its islands and coastal cities threatened by the rising sea level, Asia now is regarded as a major contributor to the problem. The world realizes now more than ever that climate change has to be tackled in the developing countries as well, and especially in emerging Asia. So when the agreement reached in the recent Bali summit stresses the need to speed up the transfer of low-carbon technologies to developing countries, there is no doubt in my mind it's the newly industrialized economies of Asia that are meant in the first place. International and national incentives for the use of clean energy are already in place and are expected to grow at a faster pace, especially with the increasing likelihood that the United States would join an international treaty on climate change in the near future. Another reason for why Asia offers an excellent opportunity to invest in the industry is the existence of huge natural clean energy resources. Wind and geothermal energies, for example, are abundant in many countries and are already competitive sources for producing electricity in markets with extensive transmission networks. Many projects that had marginal economic feasibility in the past now provide attractive commercial returns as oil prices reach the $100 mark. India now ranks 4th and China 5th in the world in harnessing wind to produce power. It no longer raises eyebrows to hear about a plan to construct a 1,000 megawatt of wind farm in either of these 2 countries. In fact, it is estimated that India and China will each add about 8,000 megawatts of wind power in just the coming 3 years. As to geothermal power, Asia has huge potential there as well. The Philippines ranks in the world second only to the United States in producing electricity from the heat at the core of the earth. Indonesia, which is now a modest producer of 1,000 megawatts of geothermal power, has proven reserves of 27,000 megawatts. Biodiesel also provides attractive investment opportunities in Asia. A study by the University of Wisconsin ranks Malaysia and Indonesia first and second in absolute biodiesel potential, ahead of Argentina, USA, and Brazil. And the 5 countries collectively account for 80% of the global absolute biodiesel potential. As to solar energy, it currently has a limited advantage in commercial applications, but that could change quickly if the introduction of new promising technologies, such as thin film, is accelerated, or if consumer demand for distributed energy takes off. In fact, technological breakthroughs in solar will also mean a lot to our region, where the sun is an abundant